problems or want to highlight wrongdoing. There doesn't seem to be any mention of that in the plan now. As I say, I may have missed it, but I would think that's a very important part of changing the culture of the organisation.
Within the policing plan, well, take that feedback. Yes,
and I think it should be facilitated and encouraged, and it should be the proactive in terms of Garda management to encourage people to come forward within your own organisation of problems that are there as well.
Joe, is there anything specific there?
I take the point that it's not in the policing plan. There is work. I mean, there's a new protected disclosure policy close to agreement. So there have been discussions with the representative bodies around that. But I share the point. It's not specifically called out in the plan, and something we can take away.
I think, given the history over the last number of years, I think it's something that's very important, and that all members of the force should feel that they can come forward and it should be recognised. So.
I think the Commissioner has spoken on a number of occasions about that in principle. That very supportive of people speaking up, coming forward, and that's called out in our code of ethics. It's there embedded into the things that we hold true. But I take the point about the plan, and we'll certainly take that offline.
No bother. And just final, Chairperson, just in relation to the presentation that you gave earlier on, in relation to the Garda numbers, the increase in Garda numbers, which is welcomed. I'm just wondering how much you talk about since 2017, there's 2,090 Garda recruited, and the present then up to 2021 there'll be a further 1,500. How much does that actually mean in terms of additional Gardaí? Because obviously there's Gardaí retiring and stuff like that there. So what's the actual increase in Garda numbers rather than the figure in additional Gardaí recruited?
So as we were on the 31st of August this year, we were sitting at 14,234 Garda members, so sworn Garda members. At the 31st of December 2014, we were sitting at 12,799. So there's an increase of 1,500. We have to do another real increase of 800 to get to a strength of 15,000. So 15,000 Garda members. But I think the other important thing to say is about how we also use those Garda members. And there is an increase in our Garda staff as well, out to 4,000, and a portion of that, 1,000 of that, is so that we displace other Garda members out to some form of frontline duties. And that's yet to happen. It's quite a challenge because, as we sit at the moment, we don't actually have 1,000 Garda members, sworn members doing administrative duties. We're going to have to be more inventive about what roles then the Garda staff take on, and that's what I was talking about earlier, about these organisational support roles, so front desk type roles, CCTV, command and control, which is already happening. So these are roles that we would see Garda staff being employed in going into the future.
And so, but to achieve an additional 800 Garda members, new members, you have to take on, what, 1,600, 1,700?
About 15. We say if you work out, we're approximately 300, 320 per annum cessations. So so you need to be bringing in about
320 is just replacement.
Yeah, just a mark time.
Right.
So this year brought in 600. So perhaps a real increase in the organisation of about 270.
Right. I think that maybe the real increase might be more useful, a figure to be shown, just for.
Yeah.
Okay, Deputy Pringle.
Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Jack Chambers, please. May I, just for the information of other colleagues, to be followed by Senator Niall O'Donnell and then Deputy Dennis Naughton, if he returns. Everyone's name is down that have indicated, and I'm very sorry there's been such a big interest.
Do you want to take I think you signalled, do you want to take a break?
Oh, you want to take that break? We'll adjourn for a required period, 5 or 6 minutes.
5 minutes.
Suspend is the word I should use. Thank you.
Thanks.
commence his questioning, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the Commissioner and his team for coming in and for the very comprehensive presentation. I just wanted to pick up on one thing Deputy Pringle mentioned. Just what are the actual retirement projections? Because I know there was a big, recruitment drive in the 80s, and you're at a vacuum point now where you don't have the same. When will that kick in, and how will that affect the net return? I know you mentioned a net increase, of 800 with attrition. But when will the retirement cliff edge occur again, and what will the numbers be?
We average about 330 to 350 retirements per year, and that is staying at the moment. We think that there might be a slight increase next year resultant from pay increase matters that have matured. And so therefore there might be an increase in the numbers going on, so it's a little difficult to project. In terms of the longer term projections, Deputy, if I can be permitted to come back and maybe look at that in a little bit more detail, but that's where it is, if that's okay.
That's fine, thanks. Just on obviously the reorganisation and the changes that are occurring, there's been little or no change, I suppose, from a Dublin context. One thing I'd like to ask is, was there ever any consideration, obviously we've DMR South Central and North Central in the Dublin division. Has there been any consideration of greater coordination? I suppose, was there any consideration for actually combining those two divisions? I know that's different to some of the requests that come from others, and the fact that there's concerns about the merger, but I've just noticed from when you look at the broader Dublin region how within the city centre we've got two separate structures, and was there been any consideration of that?
Just that issue. In fact, the DMR will be impacted by the changes, not structurally in terms of we won't be making divisions joining up together to make them bigger, but we will be introducing our model in terms of having our administrative units, we'll say, at division level, and our crime superintendents and our governance superintendents. That will actually apply right across the country, and indeed the DMR. And one of the divisions where we piloted is the DMR. But in answering to your question in relation to the DMR North and DMR South, in fact, one of the issues I would say is emerging from our restructuring process is that there may be capabilities there where we can merge across the DMR itself, because it's a relatively small geographic, we'll say, area. Events like examples like event management is something that we could share across a number of divisions, but we're looking at that right now in terms of how we roll out the entire model. Yeah, that's good. Just wanted to ask about Garda overtime. In my own constituency in the K district, we obviously with Farmley and the Phoenix Park and a serious security requirements from a national perspective, that's taken from the local division. Has there been any additional, is there additional overtime given at a local level when they have to deal with national requirements? That's my first question. My second question related to overtime is, have you discussed an additional overtime budget with the Department of Justice, and also managing overtime in the context of unplanned national visits, which we had the Pope last year, we had Vice President Pence this year, and other national visits that will inevitably occur. How are you planning for that as a spillover effect outside of the other overtime which occurs on a planned basis?
Overtime distribution within the organisation is weighted towards operational requirement. About 20% of the overtime is used up in the quarter-hour briefing at the commencement of each turn of duty, so that is a considerable amount of that. And also about another quarter perhaps is used in ancillary work, perhaps around court security, court attendance, escorting prisoners, etc. So there's a considerable amount of our overtime is drawn into other things which needn't necessarily be adding to the policing plan overall. So, but we are very conscious then of what's left around its distribution, but also then its control. So, and that's been a focus for this year and other years as well. And this year in particular, we are very determined to stay within our annual budget. We had an extraordinary pressure applied, and it just isn't around overtime in terms of these visits. Both President Trump and Vice President pence. There is other expenditure beyond overtime, and you've got all sorts of issues around feeding people, travel costs, but also then the operational costs in respect of equipment and the additional equipment. So those are very considerable operations, and we still remain in negotiation or in conversation with the government in respect of those, primarily as well because the Vice President Pence's visit is not as yet fully costed. We're still working through the costs in respect of that. But they are very considerable and indeed, as you say, extraordinary operations and unknown on the 1st of January when we set out on the year and are quite considerable expenditures. But overall, in respect of our Garda vote, we are determined this year to remain within the confines of that expenditure and in effect cut our cloth accordingly.
But you are over budget up to now. That's been reported. So are you going to, will there be an attempt to reduce the...
Oh yeah, well we have to get back on track, and in July we set down some measures by which we'd be able to retrieve some of that overspend, but also then there's strict control on overtime at the moment as well. The overtime that we can control, we do control. We want to make sure that we're only spending what is essential for an operational purpose.
Well, I think that's important because I know overtime, particularly around the different Dublin regions, plays a very important role, and the Garda have been excellent in trying to prevent a lot of the serious gangland incidents occurring and providing better visibility. So I think it's important that that's maintained at the very least, and that any restriction in overtime doesn't affect that frontline policing that is occurring across the region. So,
but can I maybe just add in respect to overtime? Like, overtime isn't a shorthand for our operational activity. Overtime is on top of a 40-hour week for our members, and what I want to be focused on is making sure those 40 hours are used effectively and efficiently in the first place, and overtime it is extra work in what is already demanding work, and I think of obligations around the well-being and welfare of staff as well to try and manage that tightly too.
In the document you've submitted, you mentioned unoccupied outlets in towns.
Yes.
And what will that be about?
Well, I think we get a lot of requests about stations and presence and visibility, and we're just thinking, perhaps more in larger residential areas. And it may not work in rural areas so much, but certainly maybe in the cities, and the large sort of suburban areas, if we can use a shop unit in effect as a Garda post. But my colleagues are being very innovative in any respect, and creating presence, for instance, in on post offices when pensions are being, or when elderly people are getting pension, etc. And also then using local halls, etc., to create a clinic type facility. So there's a lot of that going on as well, and I think if people take a lot of comfort from a station, but for them to get real comfort from a station, we need to, in effect, staff it and be patrolling out of it. But if we want to create a further presence, there's other things that we might want to think to do about making sure we're available and are there to talk to people.
I want to get an update on Step Aside. What is the position about Step Aside Garda Station? We've had mixed reports on it.
Well, Step Aside is to open in the next quarter, and it is to be staffed, so there will be Step Aside personnel. Step Aside is to run as an operational station 24/7. It's also proposed, though I don't think finalised yet, but certainly proposed to put some elements of roads policing within Step Aside as well. It's a local decision, but I don't believe it's to be open 24/7 in front of the front desk's not going to be open 24/7, but there will be a front desk available during the day, during the office hours, and so we're looking forward to getting it open and seeing it as in effect another base to patrol from.
Yeah, because there seems to be we've had the Minister Ross with his plaque stating that it'll be open and operational 24/7, and then we have someone else who received information from your office saying it'll be open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. So I think there's kind of confusion about this local turf war about operational hours. I think it's a good opportunity to clarify.
Well,
we've had a lot of controversy about the station and Minister Ross trying to dictate hours and operational decisions on it. So I'd welcome clarity on what the actual position is.
Well, I've only provided one direction, in that it should be staffed 24/7, it should, and therefore operate 24/7. Its opening hours are a matter then for the local management to decide upon. I don't envisage that it's going to be a 24/7 station, and it's going to be 24/7 operational and effective roads policing, vehicles going backwards and forwards to it. So, and that makes good sense, and that's the only direction that I've given.
Just finally, Chair, my question relates to the attack and abduction of Kevin Lunny from Fermanagh, who's dumped on this side of the border in a shocking and deplorable attack in the last 24 hours. And this seems to be a trend of attacks against Quinn Industrial Holdings, and there's, I suppose, concern in the local community that there's been no arrests, and there's been no follow-through from a public perspective about the serious number of incidents that have occurred. So I suppose my question is, what is being done from a cross-border perspective with the PSNI in ensuring that these thugs who are intimidating employees and workers, that they're brought to justice? I think to see anyone attacked, abducted and assaulted in that way is truly shocking and deplorable. And to be, and I suppose, I think we need follow through and a commitment that this will receive absolute priority, because it's just shocking for that man to be left in that way.
As Chair, Commissioner, before you respond, I had intended raising this matter when it came to my own turn at the end, but I'd like to join Deputy Chambers in addressing this matter briefly. I happen to know Mr. Lunny personally, and I'm absolutely shocked to learn of what has happened. Now, I understand that Kevin Lunny, who is both a Director and Chief Operations Officer of Quinn Industrial Holdings, was abducted from his home or near his home last evening and was subjected to what only can be described as a most horrific attack, a most brutal assault, and that he was taken from his home in Derrylane in County Fermanagh and later dumped in Cornafane in County Cavan. Now, this is an outrage deserving of wholehearted condemnation, and as chair of this committee, I'm quite confident that many of our colleagues are no longer here, having already participated in the direct engagement with you. But I have every confidence that I'm speaking on all our behalves, and I believe that the people responsible need to be quickly identified and brought before the courts in either jurisdiction where the full rigours of the law should apply. And I would urge, I'll take the opportunity here today as chair of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice and Equality, joining with my colleague Deputy Chambers and all others in attendance, I would urge anyone with any information regarding this horrific attack to come forward and to cooperate with either the PSNI or on Garda Síochána as they decide most appropriate in their circumstances. I'm absolutely shocked by this, and I join Deputy Chambers in urging on Garda Síochána to do everything within their power to swiftly bring the people responsible to justice. Where am I, good Commissioner?
This was a very serious incident, and it was treated as such right from the initial report last night, initially made to PSNI, and they were quickly in touch with us in terms of a joint response to this. The situation developed as you've described, and a very vicious assault has happened, and we are now conducting a full investigation into this matter, and we are working closely then with our colleagues in the Police Service of Northern Ireland. There's been a number of incidents in recent times in terms of intimidation and attacks on property, and some of those have been very dangerous in themselves and involving dangerous attacks of arson and setting fire to vehicles and indeed damage to buildings as well. So we're very conscious of just this ongoing threat to the directors, specifically in this case Mr Lunny, and you can be assured of really full and active response on our part in terms of the investigation. I know the same is the case in the Police Service of Northern Ireland, and this is a subject of ongoing discussion because we have, in effect, a joint operation in response to these types of incidents and to provide assurance and protection to Mr Lunny and his colleagues in the management positions that they hold. It is entirely unacceptable and incredible position, and in effect people carrying on lawful business, offering securing employment for local people are treated in this way. And we are absolutely determined, as are, I'm sure, our colleagues in Police Service Northern Ireland, to bring the perpetrators to justice in this.
Thank you.
Just has there been anyone brought to justice? I mean, I know that's a concern from some of our local representatives that are there, that there's a perception that whether it's an information vacuum or whether it's the cross-border issue, but why hasn't anyone been brought to justice who has already attacked or assaulted or brought violence to that company? Because this is a trend now that I think needs serious cooperation with yourselves and the PSNI, as you've committed to, and I accept that.
I think we have conducted investigations, and in effect these are joint and cross-border investigations as well. Some of the individuals engaged in this are very careful to make sure that their identities are concealed, and indeed, you know, the characteristic of the burning of vehicles, the burning and the destruction of evidence is very evident in this, and have made this particularly difficult. My recollection, but I don't want it to depend upon my recollection. I just want to be sure of the facts, because I've thought that individuals had been brought to justice. So if you can allow me just to research that matter, because I believe matters were before the courts, but I may be mistaken. I want to be sure, and I can then give a written response in respect of that. But they're pretty difficult investigations. The individuals who have engaged in this go out of their way to make sure that they're not easy to catch through, as I say, destruction of evidence and concealing identities, etc. But this has certainly been, you know, a considerable step up in what's happened in this direct abduction and then subsequent very serious assault, Mr Lunny. So we'll want to be pursuing that with all vigour, because we want to be very concerned. And we were very concerned last night as this situation developed.
Okay, Deputy Chambers, and again, thank you for addressing it. As I indicated, I was going to at the end, but it was good that we could address it together. Senator Niall O'Donnell, please.
And thank you, Commissioner, and to your colleagues as well. Commissioner, a number of committee colleagues have raised the concerns about the emergence of a hard border, and certainly from my own perspective at previous meetings and my party's perspective, we've been very clear in regards to that. But I do want to raise with you something that you'll be familiar with, and that's the concern that there is an emergence of a hard border of sorts for people who are travelling by bus across the border at present. You'll have received correspondence from the Committee for the Administration of Justice in the North and the Irish Council for Civil Liberties here in the South in regards to their concerns about the racial profiling of people who are travelling across the border on public transport. Now I'm wondering, and I have probably 3 questions, Commissioner, which I'll ask in bulk to save time. I'm wondering in the first instance, and I've asked this before of your predecessors, but has there been a strategic policy decision by Garda leadership to increase checks along the border, checks of passports on public transportation? Under what legislation are these checks taking place? Because if you haven't seen the correspondence yet from ICCL or the CAJ, they will question the legality of some of these checks. And I'm wondering if there has been that strategic policy decision taken, because the checks are happening. There's no doubt about that. I've witnessed it myself travelling down to this institution. But I'm just wondering, how have Garda been directed that they should tell the difference between Irish and EU citizens who don't have to produce passports or papers and non-EU citizens who may have to produce papers? Thanks, Chair.
There has been no policy change, but we, as an organisation, are very conscious of organised crime and the movement of individuals, either under coercion as human trafficking or as part to facilitate organised crime in terms of paid movement of individuals. So we have been concentrating on the movement of individuals as part of our responsibilities of immigration. We do have a unit based in Dundalk which performs occasional mobile patrols on the M1, and they have made detections in respect of immigration type offences there. Now, to date this year, I'm told, or sorry, this would be to August, 128 detections have been made. But that's part of our ongoing responsibilities, and that would be far overshadowed by the detections that have been made at Dublin Port and Dublin Airport, and indeed at Cork Port and Airport as well. So, there is not a concentration of enforcement activity in respect of the common travel area and the border. This is just part of our ongoing efforts in respect of immigration crime.
So I'm wondering, and I don't doubt that you have to monitor that, and I'm not questioning that responsibility on your part, Commissioner, or on the part of the Garda Síochána. What I am questioning is how individual officers define who they're going to check papers from when they board those vehicles. So, for example, and I don't question the professionalism or the friendliness of individual Gardaí who I have witnessed get on board vehicles, but they don't ask me for a passport. They don't ask me for papers. They don't ask people who look like me for papers or passports. And if there are people who don't look like you or I, then they are being asked for papers. Now, that leaves the Gardaí not just ethically and morally on very shaky ground, but also legally as well. So I'm wondering, in the first instance, because my understanding is that there is no legislation for checks at the land border in terms of the common travel area, which we are all being assured will be maintained and sustained whatever happens around Brexit. There are obviously deep reservations, and I think they stack up, they do firm up, and there is an increase, certainly just from an anecdotal perspective, as a cross-border worker and someone who uses public transport to come to work in these searches. So I would be interested, again, under the legislation, Commissioner, and also how Gardaí are being directed. And to be fair, if they haven't been directed, or if there is a kind of maybe a bit of a clumsy or a haphazard approach to this thus far, that there may be consideration to engage with the Garda officers who are responsible, so that they have a clear understanding of their legal responsibilities, but also on their, I suppose, societal responsibilities, not to fall into the realms of potentially racial profiling of people who are travelling north and south.
I would say, from my understanding of it and what I've seen of it, that these are our operations directed towards the organised crime involvement in immigration type crime. And as I've said, that's human trafficking or the illegal movement of individuals for considerable sums of money, and that's what we are addressing. But the specific points that you raise, if you allow me to come back to you, because you do raise a very serious point about who the checks are being applied to, because and I'd want to have a fulsome answer to that. Yeah. I haven't seen the correspondence from the CAJ, and I had information around our immigration efforts as opposed to the specific answer to the CHA issue. Secondly, then, I think just to put it in context, it would be useful to provide the information which showed you the detections of the Dundalk unit as opposed to what's happening at either the airport or Dublin Airport or Dublin Port, where there is very considerable enforcement activity. And the common travel area, for all its strengths, also creates an opportunity for organised crime as well. And we're obliged then to police that and do our utmost to make sure that we're not subject to criminal gangs moving people illegally through this jurisdiction and in effect into Northern Ireland to get access into the UK, or the reverse of that happening as well. Yeah. So there are policing issues in this as well that are important too.
I appreciate that fully, Commissioner, and I don't want it to be left thinking that you do need to effectively, where there are the illegal movement of people or people are being trafficked. I want that policed and policed very effectively. I think the concern is, as I've said, is the nature of the checks as they are currently happening and currently implemented, and the concern around under what legislation, if any, those are taking place. So look, you've committed, Commissioner, to meet with the organisations at least once the correspondence reaches you. Yeah. I hope you do. They're far better equipped to deal with this than I am, and certainly it's something I think we could explore at future meetings, Chair. So,
Senator O'Donnell. Now, just to explain to members, the next person I have here, it would have been Deputy Dennis Naughton, but he's not with us anymore. So I go on then to Deputy David Cullinane. Now, he will be followed by Senator Colin Burke. Now, it's just to explain, other colleagues were probably seated before they saw Senator Burke take his seat, but he had been in earlier in the meeting's deliberations and indicated and had other business to attend to. He will be followed by Deputy Jackie Cattle, then by Deputy Jacqueline de Bredwin and Deputy Donegal O'Leary. That's the remaining order, and I apologise that people have had to wait so long. Deputy David Cullinane, please.
Thank you, Caoirleach. It's always worth the wait to come into this committee and to, first of all, welcome to the Garda Commissioner and his team. And I want to join, if I can, in the strong condemnations which have been made by yourself, Caoirleach, and Deputy Chambers in respect of last night's incident. And I hope that people will come forward if they have information, and I hope that the perpetrators of this crime are brought to justice very quickly. I want to thank the Garda Commissioner for his work over the last year. It's his first anniversary, and on your first anniversary we're having an opportunity to talk about the changes which you hope to make in relation to the structures of An Garda Síochána, and then operationally how they will play out across the state. And I do genuinely wish you well in that work. And like any strategy, when you break eggs to make an omelette, some people obviously will be upset about the eggs being broke, and there's going to be local reactions, I suppose, to some of the changes. So in that context, and I am in favour of reform to bring about better policing and more effective policing, can I ask, first of all, the changes that have been made, have they been in any way underpinned by the National Planning Framework?
Certainly, some of the factors are taken into place, and I know some of the issues maybe that you're raising locally, per se, but I'll
get to that in a minute. But my question to you is: was it underpinned by?
Yes, they were taken into consideration. Yeah.
And the National Planning Framework identifies a number of regional cities where it envisages population growth of about 50–60%. And the regional cities, the map, if you look at it there, Galway City, Limerick City, Cork City, and Waterford City. And if you look at the divisional boundaries that are proposed, Galway retains its division, city and county. Limerick retains its division, city and county. Cork City retains its division. But Waterford, again, which is a regional city, identified as such in the National Planning Framework, amalgamates with Kilkenny and Carlow. So why was that decision made? Why is Waterford not retaining its standalone division when other regional cities, and I would argue we take Limerick of a comparable size, and Kerry even, which is not a regional city identified in the National Planning Framework, why are they retaining standalone divisions and Waterford not? Was there a particular reason for that?
Well, if you look at our criteria in terms of, well, deciding the numbers of the number of divisions we'd have, would say certainly the number of personnel, so that each division would have the capability to deliver the wide range of services across their command, would say was a factor we took consideration. Like Galway or Waterford doesn't have those numbers right now, would say. But if you do bring Waterford, would say, and Carlow, Kilkenny together, then you get a division where you have those type of numbers where you'll be able to give the range of services that we want to be able to give consistently across the organisation.
Are you talking about Garda numbers or
correct
numbers?
Garda numbers, yeah. Garda numbers, yeah.
Okay. And what are you talking about? Overall numbers of Gardaí, or are you talking about superintendents and the chief?
Overall numbers, including Garda staff, our entire workforce.
Okay. And would that include then the number of Garda stations as well, or is it just the number of personnel?
Garda stations was also taken into consideration. That's a factor because it obviously impacts on the number of resources that we have and our capability to spread that resource across the division, we'll say.
And that might be a sore point in some counties where Garda stations were closed over the last number of years, particularly in rural areas. 32 councillors in Waterford City and County, and all of the Oireachtas members, bar one in Waterford, wrote to yourself, Mr Harris, outlining concerns in respect of the potential headquarters of the new division for Waterford and Kilkenny and Carlow being outside of Waterford. I know you've said in response to people earlier some of those decisions may not have been made. I would ask you to bear in mind, and I know that you have to do a process independently. Having said that, people will look at that and compare what's happening here to what happened with Stepaside Garda Station, where the Minister was presented with a plaque on the basis of what is perceived to have been a political decision and not an operational decision. But leaving that aside, I believe there should be decisions made through proper process, proper criteria, and accepting in this case, in terms of these reforms, that is the case. But there also has to be due regard given to national policy in terms of spatial planning and population growth, because we have to join up government and we have to join up policy. And given that Waterford City is the regional city, there is a concern, and there would be a very real concern. I met a number of your own members, very senior members in Waterford as well. They're very supportive of the changes which are being made overall. They met Oireachtas members and members of the Joint Policing Committee at our request, to be fair, and not theirs, but they did have some concerns which they expressed to us. So can I ask just first of all, has a decision been made on where the headquarters of the new division for Waterford, Carlow and Kilkenny will be?
Well, the final decision hasn't been made, but a proposal has been put to me. But if I may just reserve that, because we want to look in around just where our divisional headquarters is going to be. But you make very salient points about what we should consider, and in effect, we're putting a divisional headquarters in, and in part that is symbolic. But on the other hand, we're trying to minimise that as much as possible by making sure that we have a good representation of command and rank throughout any of these divisions. But the points you make in respect of Waterford are understood and received in terms of its position, and we'll bear that in mind.
I normally have a very good ability to read between the lines. So while you want to reserve judgment, would I be comforted by what you've said, in the sense that if Waterford is the regional city, if a recommendation has been made to yourself, that the good people of Waterford and your own members on the ground don't have to be as concerned as they are?
Well, I don't want to give any more comfort then, if I may. So
okay. Can I ask them?
Because I'll be inundated then for messages of comfort. But what I want to emphasise again, we are making balanced decisions. In part, it's based on the estate that we have at the moment, and but a strong part as well, and what's possible within that. Because I'm not going to get the money for 10 new divisional headquarters, and neither am I asking for it. But also, then, I'm very determined that the leadership of a division is visible to everyone. That's not only just my staff and their staff, but also to society that they're policing, the communities they police. And so when we're doing this, we are doing our very best to come to good compromises which meet local concerns, which meet our operational demands, and beyond that, then we are keeping this very much a policing senior command in consultation with their divisional commanders.
I think, to be fair, I do understand the independence of the process, and we see it sometimes in healthcare that there can't be sometimes direct political interference when you're talking about changes which experts, and people who work in the area in first and foremost need to be the main decision maker. So I don't have a difficulty or a quarrel with that. I've made my point, as have 32 councillors and the Oireachtas members, including the Minister for State in Waterford. Can I ask about finally the divisional, the district superintendents?
Yes.
So in Waterford, as an example, we have 3. We've one in Waterford City, one in Dungarvan, servicing West Waterford, and one in Tramore. And they're geographically based superintendents. They know their communities. I know all 3 of them, so they work very well, very effective superintendents. Is it the case that those geographically based superintendent roles will cease, and then we will move to issue-based superintendents? Is that what's being proposed? I just first of all want clarity on that.
It's a hybrid of that, in that we have community engagement superintendents. Every division will have 2 of those, and they in effect will split the area in terms of geography. Some critical areas may have a third, but that's not going to be uniform across the divisions. And then we have superintendents with specific functions for crime, and then for this government.
But that brings me to
role.
the amalgamated one for Waterford, Kilkenny and Carlow. So at the moment what I'm saying is that we have 3 district superintendents in Waterford City and County. If the new amalgamated division is Waterford, Kilkenny and Carlow, are you saying then that there will be 2 geographical superintendents to service that district? Or are you saying 2 for Waterford and
service the division? But
division, should say,
may I also just give...
So 2 for the entire division, for 3 counties?
Community engagement superintendents for the division, plus 2 others who are still superintendents in Garda Síochána and will still be based in an office somewhere. And it'll be clear that they, also have a responsibility that all members of Garda Síochána have around engagement and community confidence. But beyond that, where we take a superintendent out, we'll replace that individual then with an inspector, so that there'll be an inspector leading the local community policing team in what had been the old district, but that inspector will not have the weight of administration and also then complaints and human resource issues that are presently weighing down a superintendent. It'll actually be, in effect, a community policing inspector, and that will be the resource that you may go to in some places.
Can I just say, Cathaoirleach, in conclusion, and I thank the Commissioner for his responses, I do understand his logic in terms of the districts and the changes which are being made. Sometimes a one-size-fits-all policy doesn't work. So if you have a county which has, it's very big geographically, it's both urban and rural, maybe then what might work for Limerick or what might work for Dublin City may not work for Waterford. So I would have a bit of a concern about 2 district superintendents for 3 counties, when at the moment Waterford has 3 district geographically based superintendents, and that is a concern also of individuals and senior Gardaí in Waterford. And I genuinely don't believe that they're making these arguments in respect of their own positions. Their own positions, in my view, are safe. It's not about that. There seems to be genuine concerns, and I hope that those concerns are taken on board, and hopefully when we see the final outcome, we won't be as nervous as we are at the moment, Commissioner.
Well, even in just in answer to that, what in effect we were creating a model division, and then we have to apply that into the actual reality of what a division will be and all the extra factors. So this expression that you hear, straw man, and then we take that out and we apply it to a division and see how will it work, and if it won't work, then what else we have to do. And that's where it's just not, we've talked about autonomy and around local involvement, but a good part of that is also about implementation and having a say in what implementation is. But at the same time, I'm trying to keep within a corporate framework, because the best will in the world, sometimes costs start spiralling away from you, and I have to maintain a control on costs, because every superintendent I have is less in terms of a Gardaí out in the ground, so there's a wee bit of give and take here around the resource in the organisation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Cullinane. And now Senator Colin Burke, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and welcome the Garda Commissioner to the committee here, and also to join with you, Chairperson, in condemning the attack that occurred yesterday, and to wish the Gardaí and our colleagues in Northern Ireland every success in bringing those people who carried out that attack to justice in a very short time frame. Could I just raise an issue, and it's going back to an issue that Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick raised, and it was the reason why I came into this committee, and that's about unidentified bodies or unidentified parts of human remains. I've been pushing very much over the last 12 months for a centralised database to be established. My understanding is that, and the person who came to me about it, I got them to deal directly with the Department of Justice on it, and this person has forensics experience. And my understanding was the matter was progressing. As I understand it now, that if a body is, say, identified in Cork, the information in relation, and it's not identified, then that information stays in Cork. And there were a number of cases over the last 2 years where, in fact, 2 and 2 has been put together, and we've identified human remains that were discovered many years ago. I'm concerned now that there was an article written in the Sunday Times in the last few weeks where a person from the Department of Justice didn't see the necessity for having a centralised database of information in relation to unidentified bodies to be established. And I'm very concerned about that, and I'm just wondering, what is your view on this issue? My understanding is that when the information, when a body is recovered and it's not identified, the information stays within that particular coroner's area. Whereas what we're talking about and what I'm talking about and what I've been pushing is that all of the information will be centralised so that, you know, there could be a more, I suppose, joined up thinking in relation to trying matching information. For instance, there were 2 cases in the last 12 months. One person disappeared in Limerick in 2000. Remains were washed up in Clare 9 months later. It took 17 years before someone put 2 and 2 together. There was another case where a person went missing in Dublin about 10, 11 years ago. 3 months after the person goes missing, remains are washed up in Louth, but no one put 2 and 2 together until last year. And they're the 2 particular cases I'm talking about. So I'm just wondering, what's your own view about establishing a centralised database, which is where all the forensic information is kept, and so that there is a direct link that if anyone wants to do a cross-check, that information is available immediately.
Thank you, Senator. Commissioner.
And I just have a follow-up question from that.
That's fine. Thank you.
I would like to have the opportunity just to make a written response to this, because it does touch upon very sensitive issues, and it does impact on people and impact on them very deeply. And now, there has been successes between unidentified bodies and then identifying them through DNA, and that's primarily then with, I understand, family members who have provided a DNA sample, and it's use a process of familial DNA. That process, I think in any jurisdiction, has only just emerged over the last 4 or 5 years ago, and certainly although DNA has been around from the late 80s into the early 90s really, it's only been applied to this in recent times, I think both in the United Kingdom and obviously with success here. So there is an attraction that if you do recover say a body from the sea, that you are able to go quickly to a DNA record, and then that would resolve things quickly for the family. Particularly the Irish Sea, where just the vagaries of the tides and the currents, etc., can mean that bodies do in fact travel right across the Irish Sea, and people who have went missing from Ireland have turned up on the Anglesey coast, for instance. So it's just not a national response. We have to look at the response across the Irish Sea as well. So I would like to just see where we are as that, because I don't think we compartmentalise this. Like if somebody is missing, We do take, in effect, a national notice of this, and do think the Forensic Science Ireland and their response have taken a very sort of national response to this in terms of the investigation of remains that have been recovered, and we have assisted certainly in the investigations which may have directed them towards a recovered body being a certain individual, and then allowed then the DNA testing to clarify that with certainty then. So there's quite a piece in this, Senator, and I would like the opportunity, because it's just not about us, it's also about Forensic Science Ireland and the resources they put to this, and also then within our own national units, the review of some of these cases which has taken place as well.
Okay. I'm coming at this from the point of view of that I pushed through the change in legislation in relation to missing persons, where a family now can apply to court, where all the information is that the person has died. And while that debate was going on in Shannon, a family came to me here in Dublin where a member of their family had disappeared 2 years ago. And there is a provision under the Coroner's Act where the Minister for Justice can direct or can request a coroner to hold an inquest even where a body is not recovered. And I wrote to the Minister, and as a result of that letter to the Minister, the Garda came to the family's house and took DNA samples in order to send them on to Wales and to France to see if the body may have been washed up there. So what I'm saying to you is that if that was reciprocal, if it was a case of someone in Wales writing to the Irish authorities, there isn't a centralised database. And just following up on what I'm saying to you, and it's kind of a tied-in question, and that's in relation to the case in Limerick, the late Gussie Shanahan. What I'm really disappointed about, and I've written to you, Commissioner, on this matter, where the family waited 17 years before they were called into the Garda station in October of last year. They were advised that the remains that had been washed up in Clare were the remains of her late brother, or I think father, and the son. And basically, what I'm disappointed about is that the relevant documentation hasn't been sent from Limerick to the coroner in Clare for the coroner to hold an inquest and for a death cert to be issued. Now, that's 11 months later. And the family are really concerned. They contacted me about 4 weeks ago on this matter, and I really think it's disappointing that 11 months later, having waited 17 to 18 years, that they're still waiting for what has been a really difficult time for them and a difficult time for everyone involved. So I'm just wondering if that issue can be dealt with as well. And that there wouldn't be such a time delay between, clear evidence that the person we're talking about is the person that was discovered a number of years ago, and then about the appropriate correspondence being sent on to the coroner for the particular area. So I would just ask that that would be taken on board, in particular for this family.
Well, I'll deal with that, make sure it's dealt with expeditiously. I don't know the circumstances of the case, so I regret to say I haven't seen the specific letter that you've sent me. So, but I will inquire into it and get that.
No, I did get a reply back from the Chief Superintendent in the Limerick area, but it still doesn't deal with the issue.
Okay.
The issue still has not been dealt with. The information has not been sent to the coroner in Clare. Therefore, the coroner in Clare cannot deal with the matter now until such time as the Garda give their documentation.
Well, we'll get that matter dealt with expeditiously.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Commissioner. Colleagues, there are only 17 minutes left. We have to vacate at 1:15. Is it possible, and the Chair has yet to participate, I always wait till the end. Can we have 4 minutes each? Can we try to curtail it? I apologise to Deputies Cahill and Bratnock, but Deputy Naughton had been on the list before, and I have to bring him in at this stage to be consistent. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. There are two specific issues that I want to raise with the Commissioner. and the main issue that I want to raise with you, Commissioner, you've touched on in your initial contribution this morning, and that was the concern that there is, very genuine and heartfelt concern across the country, that wherever the divisional headquarters is based, that's where all of the superintendents will be based. And I know that you stressed this morning that that would not be the case in this instance, but I'm not naive enough to believe that that will happen in reality. I have heard many heads of organisations come in here before Oireachtas committees and state that, you know, the staff will remain deployed across the country. But whether it's by osmosis or how it happens, but over time they drift to wherever the central headquarters is. And I have genuine concern in relation to the headquarters that is currently based in Roscommon, the divisional headquarters. And while you've said that this is a very new approach that's been taken, I find it very surprising that your predecessors on occasion tried to move the divisional headquarters from Roscommon to Castlebar, and now that concern is there again. And they tried to move the divisional headquarters from Mullingar to Navan, and funnily enough, that's there again. And I believe that over time, you will see all of the superintendents based in the divisional headquarters, and if we look at the alignment that's being proposed at the moment, the likelihood is that the superintendents will be based in